Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the kickoff of the Camera Education Institute Teacher Professional Development webinar series. My name is Jess Sadik, a Senior Education Analyst at the Institute. Founded in 2021, the Camera Education Institute, a department of the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis. The Institute provides educational materials and guidance to educators, parents, students, and communities to promote accurate and balanced instruction about the Middle East, Israel, the Jewish people, in K-12 classrooms. Last fall, the Institute released its new curriculum, The History of the Jewish People in the Land of Israel. We had found that many curricula across the United States at the K-12 level simply do not cover completely and accurately the historical account of the Jewish connection to the land of Israel from ancient to modern times. So we developed our own curricula to fill that gap. Aligned with state social studies standards, the curriculum's 6 lessons utilize a wide range of primary sources, secondary sources, artifacts, video, and maps. Before we get started, I'd like to note the date of the next webinar, October 22nd, which will cover the history of Zionism and the movement for Jewish self-determination. 3 other webinars will follow on December 10th, February 4th, and April 15th. We will send a follow-up email with these dates, registration information, and a link to our curriculum. Tonight, education analyst Ari Brown, who had a major role in developing our curriculum, will discuss the curriculum's first and second lessons, the historical roots of Israel in ancient history, and medieval Jewish life and the land of Israel. You will leave tonight with new information and resources and a better understanding of one of the oldest people in the world. After Ari concludes, he will take some questions. Please utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and ask your question at any point in the webinar, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. One more thing, please do not record tonight's webinar. We will post a recording to our website, camera-edu.org. With that, I want to present Ari Brown.
Thank you, Jess. In the United States, the study of Judaism, Jewish history, and Israel are mandated by most world history state standards. High-quality, factually accurate teaching materials can be hard to find, which is why the Camera Education Institute developed a series of 6 modules utilizing extensive primary sources and maps to explain over 3,000 years of Jewish history. Our curriculum, The History of the Jewish People in the Land of Israel, is available for free on the Camera Education Institute website. We will send the link to register to the curriculum following the webinar's conclusion. This webinar is the first in a 5-part series that will cover the thousands of years of Jewish history and our lesson plans. Today, I'm going to discuss the origins of the Jewish people in ancient and medieval history and their connection to the land of Israel. I will also provide an overview of the 2 corresponding lessons in our curriculum that cover this time period. We will begin with the origin of the Jews and how the land of Israel came to be central to their identity. There are 2 questions I will seek to answer here. First, who are the Jews? And second, are the Jews a religious group, an ethnic group, or a national entity? The origins of the Jews are shrouded in mystery, but Jews look to the Bible for the source of their nationhood. Historians trace the Jewish people to an ancient people called the Hebrews, or the Israelites, around 3,000 years ago. Our curriculum uses both biblical tradition and archaeological evidence to establish the Jewish connection to the land of Israel. According to the Bible, the patriarch of the Jews, Abram, later Abraham, lived in Mesopotamia before traveling to the land of Canaan, which God had promised his descendants. Canaan is in the Levant, a region in the eastern Mediterranean. This promise was passed on to Abraham's son Isaac and grandson Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, whose families formed the tribes which comprised the Israelite nation. On the map, you can see the route that Abram and his father may have taken first to the city of Haran and then Abram alone to Canaan. The Bible relates that Jacob's sons sold their brother Joseph into slavery in Egypt, where he rose to be the viceroy to Pharaoh. Jacob and his sons later traveled to Egypt to escape a famine in Canaan, and Joseph took care of them. The Israelites prospered there until a Pharaoh who didn't remember Joseph enslaved them. Eventually, Moses, whom Jews consider their greatest prophet, led the people out of Egypt to the land God had promised the patriarchs. This event is called the Exodus. Historians debate when the Exodus could have happened. Some suggest an early Exodus, around 1450 BCE, while others argue for a late Exodus, around 1250 BCE. The early Exodus theory is based on a textual analysis of certain dates given in the Bible. The late Exodus theory rests on two main pieces of evidence. First, that the Bible mentions the city of Ramses, which is thought to be associated with the pharaoh Ramses II, who reigned from around 1303 to 1213 BCE. The second is the Merneptah stele, which is an inscription by Ramses' successor Merneptah. It is the oldest known mention of Israel in the archaeological record. This important artifact, which you can see on the screen, describes notable achievements from the reign of the pharaoh Merneptah, who ruled from 1213 to 1203 BCE, and includes the line, "Israel is wasted, its seed is no longer." This hyperbolic description probably refers to the destruction of grain storehouses rather than the actual destruction of Israel. Regardless of this phrase's meaning, it tells us that by the late 13th century BCE, the ancient Israelites had arrived in the land of Israel. The ancient Israelites developed a civilization that endured through several conquests by world powers. According to the Bible, when the Israelites arrived in the land, they divided the territory between the 12 tribes. The maps you see show the rough area of Israelite settlement and the portions of the tribes. They developed an agricultural society with religion integrated into daily life. The religious center of this society was the temple in Jerusalem. David became king of Israel in 1008 BCE. He and his son Solomon brought the Israelite kingdom to its greatest extent, as pictured in the map on the screen. This period of Israelite civilization is referred to as the United Kingdom, to differentiate it from the period after its breakup, following the death of Solomon. One of the most important archaeological sites in Israel, Tel Megiddo, dates in part at least to the reigns of David and Solomon. Megiddo sits on a hill overlooking the Jezreel Valley and a critical trade route to the Fertile Crescent. The oldest ruins at the site date back to the Neolithic period. The remains of the gate you are looking at are thought to have been constructed during the era of the United Kingdom. Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem, which became the center of Israelite and later Jewish religion. The priestly blessing amulets, which you see on the screen, are notable artifacts that point to the service in the temple. I will return to these amulets and the service in the temple later, when we discuss Jewish religion and its connection to the land of Israel. Following the death of Solomon, the Israelites divided into two separate kingdoms, Judah and Israel. The map you see here shows the two kingdoms alongside those other kingdoms that border them. Judah had its capital in Jerusalem and was ruled by the house of David. Pictured here is the Tel Dan stele, an important artifact dating to the 9th century BCE that mentions the house of David. It is associated with the kingdom of Aram Damascus, which you can see in teal on the map. The artifact describes an Aramean king, possibly Hazael, defeating the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. This would corroborate the biblical account of Hazael's invasion of the land of Israel. Israel's capital was Samaria, Artifacts such as these ivory furniture inlays from the Israel Museum have been uncovered from the site of the former royal palace there. The bull and lion figures carved in the ivory represent the tribes of Joseph and Judah respectively. These were the foremost tribes in the kingdoms, Joseph in Israel and Judah, of course, in Judah. These tribes are compared to those animals in the Bible, making their use in the palace particularly striking. On this slide, you you can also see a map of Samaria where which is starred within the kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Israel was conquered by the Assyrian emperors Tiglath-Pileser III and Shalmaneser V in the 8th century BCE. Samaria fell in 720 BCE. On your screen are carved images of the two emperors from reliefs discovered at Nimrud. Witnessing the ruin of the northern kingdom, King Hezekiah of Judah began preparing to defend his kingdom from the coming Assyrian invasion. The Bible records preparations made by the king, some of which have been confirmed by archaeology. Two notable examples are the Broad Wall and the Siloam Tunnel. The Broad Wall, whose ruins are pictured here, was an improvement to the walls of Jerusalem. Some historians have argued that the Broad Wall was constructed by Hezekiah's grandfather Uzziah. The Siloam Tunnel is an underground aqueduct that transports water from the Gihon spring outside Jerusalem's walls to the Siloam pool inside the city. This impressive feat of engineering allowed Jerusalem to hold out against a siege for an incredibly long time. On the screen, you can see an image from inside the tunnel and a diagram of the tunnel's route alongside an outline of the first Temple era walls of Jerusalem. Shalmaneser's successor Sennacherib invaded Judah and conquered many key cities, such as Lachish, whose capture is depicted on a relief from Nineveh, shown on the screen. Lachish was an important fortress, and its fall was a hard blow to Judah. However, Sennacherib failed to capture Jerusalem. The Assyrian record ends with Sennacherib declaring that he encircled Jerusalem and besieged it, does not record the result of that siege. According to the Bible, on the night of Passover, God sent an angel to the Assyrian camp and destroyed Sennacherib's army, with the emperor fleeing back to Assyria in disgrace. Judah was eventually conquered by Nebuchadnezzar II, the king of Babylonia, who destroyed the temple and exiled her people in 586 BCE, as shown in the artistic rendering. In addition to the biblical account, the Nebuchadnezzar Chronicle, a Babylonian artifact, which is pictured here, also records the fall of Judah. Cyrus the Great, the Persian king, granted permission for the Jews to return to their land to rebuild the temple in 539 BCE. The picture you see is of a model of the temple and Jerusalem during the Second Temple period. We have seen evidence of this both in the Bible and the Cyrus cylinder. The cylinder, which is pictured here, describes a royal decree allowing subject peoples to return home and rebuild their temples. While the cylinder is not about the Jews, it reflects Cyrus's policy of repatriating exiled peoples to their homelands. One of the most important events of the Second Temple period was the Hasmonean Revolt. The Greek conqueror Alexander the Great annexed the land of Israel to his empire in 332 BCE. Following his death, Alexander's generals divided his empire between themselves. The land of Israel, by then called Judea, was contested between the dynasty of Ptolemy, based in Egypt, and that of Seleucus, based in Syria. Throughout this period, and particularly under the Seleucids, the influence of Greek culture grew. This Hellenization caused tensions amongst Jews and with the imperial authorities. In 167 BCE, these tensions exploded into an open civil war and revolt when the Seleucid Emperor Antiochus IV Epiphanes passed draconian laws restricting Jewish religious practice, including bans on circumcision and observing the Sabbath. The Hasmoneans, a family of priests, or Kohanim in Hebrew, led the revolt against the Greeks and the Hellenized Jews. The images on the screen show the excavation of what is thought to be the Acra fortress, built by Antiochus, and an illustration of Judah the Maccabee leading his army against the Greeks. In 63 BCE, Judea became part of the Roman Republic. The Romans installed the part Jewish Herod I as their client king of Judea in either 37 or 36 BCE. Herod made major renovations and gave the Second Temple its most recognizable form. He also undertook several important building projects, such as the city of Caesarea and his palaces of Herodium and Masada, which are both pictured here. He is also infamous in the New Testament for the massacre of the innocents. Despite his renovation of the temple, the Talmud, a major Jewish religious text, regards Herod as a complex figure, condemning him for a massacre of rabbis. According to the Talmud, when Herod was installed as king, he killed all the rabbis who he believed would not support his rule. His temple renovation project was an attempt to atone for this crime. The temple was eventually destroyed by Rome during the Great Jewish Revolt in 70 CE. Emperor Titus, who led the Roman army at the siege, had this triumphal arch constructed to celebrate his victory. This painting of the temple's destruction is by the French artist Nicolas Poussin. A few decades later, Jews rebelled against Rome again, this time under the leadership of Simon Bar Kokhba. After defeating the revolt in 136 BCE, the Romans renamed Judea to Syria Palestina, obscuring the Jewish connection to their homeland. This name is where the modern usage of the term Palestine comes from. The Romans massacred and displaced the Jews from the land, effectively creating the modern Jewish diaspora. The destruction of the temple was a religious catastrophe for the Jews. Until that time, with the relatively brief Babylonian exile as an exception, Jewish religion was based around the service in the temple. However, Judaism would adapt to the new circumstances. The rabbis adopted customs that reminded the people of the temple service, and yearning for its rebuilding became central to Judaism. This chart shows the countries that have ruled the land of Israel from Rome until the modern state of Israel. The Hasmonean kingdom was the last time the land of Israel was under sovereign Jewish control, or for that matter, had any real form of sovereignty. From the time it came under Roman rule until 1948, the land was ruled by various empires and crusader kingdoms. Throughout this period, it remained a backwater of these empires, and the population declined, with a relatively small Jewish remnant living amongst a larger Arab population until the Zionist immigrations, or aliyot in Hebrew, beginning in the late 19th century. Despite their exile to other countries, Jews maintained connections to one another and with their homeland. Many Jews immigrated to the land throughout history from across the world. Jewish communities maintained their connections to one another despite their distance in several ways. These included corresponding on matters of Jewish law, traveling, and trade. For hundreds of years, communities from around the world sent questions on Jewish law to the great academies in Babylonia and the land of Israel. The bust you see is of the medieval Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela. Jewish travelers, of whom Benjamin is the most well known, traveled around the world, recording their visits to other Jewish communities. He set out in around 1165 and returned in around 1173 to Spain. This map shows the route Benjamin took on his journey. Others include Eldad the Danite, Pitachia of Ratisbon, and Judah al-Kharizi. Many Jews worked as merchants, most notably the Radhanites, which helped maintain connections between Jewish communities across the known world. The map, you see, shows the many trade routes active during the Middle Ages, with the ones used by the Radhanites highlighted in blue. Despite the diaspora, Jews remained attached to their homeland. Several prominent Jews immigrated to the land of Israel throughout the Middle Ages. Judah Halevi, one of the most prominent poets and philosophers in Jewish history, yearned to travel to the land and composed many poems reflecting his love of Israel. He is known for the line, "My heart is in the east, and the rest of me is at the edge of the west." He journeyed to the land at the end of his life, though he died before arriving. A statue of him in Caesarea, Israel, commemorates his lifelong love of the Jewish homeland. One of his most famous poems, Zion, Surely You Will Inquire, is recited by Jews on the 9th of Av, the fast day that commemorates the destruction of the temples. Zion is another name for the land of Israel. Its opening couplets are as follows. Zion, surely you will inquire after the well-being of your imprisoned ones, those who seek your well-being and are the remnant of your flock. From west, east, north, and south, promote the well-being of the distant and the close from every direction, as well as the well-being of those bound by longing, shedding tears like the dew on Mount Hermon, wishing to shed them on your mountains. Other prominent figures who immigrated to the land include the French Rabbi Samson of Sens, who immigrated to the land of Israel in 1211 in the Aliyah of the 300 rabbis, and Nachmanides, who is pictured here. Nachmanides immigrated to the land of Israel following his debate with the apostate Jew and Dominican friar Pablo Cristiani. Cristiani had instigated the debate after claiming that he could prove the validity of Christianity from the Talmud. Despite Nachmanides' successful refutation of Cristiani's arguments, he was forced to leave Spain to escape the ire of the Dominican order. He wrote a letter to his son when he arrived, in which he described the sorry state he found Jerusalem just after the Mongol invasions. To sum up, Jewish history in the land of Israel goes back at least 3,000 years. This is based not only on the Bible, but on archaeological evidence, such as the Merneptah stele. The ancient Israelites built a complex society that continues to influence Jews down to the present day. This is particularly apparent in Jewish religious beliefs and practices, which reflect their long-standing connection to the land of Israel. Following the Exodus, the Jews traveled to Mount Sinai, where God gave them the Ten Commandments and then the whole Torah. The Torah is divided into two parts, the written and the oral Torah. The written Torah comprises three sections, Torah, prophets, and writings, with each of these representing a different level of divine revelation according to Judaism. Christians call these the Old Testament. The oral Torah expands on the commandments only mentioned in brief in the written Torah. The most significant document of the oral Torah is the Talmud. An important contribution of Judaism to the world is the concept of ethical monotheism. Judaism not only argued that there is only one God, it also argued that God is benevolent and desires for humanity to act as he does. On your screen, you can see an example of a Torah scroll, an early printed version of the Talmud, and one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, one of the earliest known manuscript of the written Torah. Until its destruction, Judaism was a religion built around the service in the temple. The primary component of this service was animal sacrifice, either brought by individuals or on behalf of the public. The service also included recitations of psalms and blessings from the priests. The priests would bless the people using a formula from the Bible. Two silver scrolls found at the Ketef Hinnom archaeological site have this formula inscribed on them and date to the late 7th or early 6th century BCE. When the temple was destroyed, Judaism adapted. In place of sacrifices, prayer became the primary mode of service. Jewish prayers consciously reference the sacrifices and include recitations of the sacrifices brought on holidays as a replacement for offering them. The priestly blessing is still bestowed by people whose ancestry traces back to the priestly caste. There are several mitzvot or commandments that only apply in the land of Israel. These include that of tithing crops and orla, the requirement to wait 3 years after planting a fruit tree to eat its produce. Additionally, the three holidays of Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot involve pilgrimages to Jerusalem. Another important adaptation in the diaspora was to include yearning for the land of Israel and the redemption throughout the liturgy and ritual. For example, the rites of Passover and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, conclude with the exclamation, "Next year in Jerusalem." In the beginning of this presentation, we asked, who are the Jews? Now we can say that the Jews are an ethno-religious group that traces their ancestry to the land of Israel. Many indigenous religions, such as Hinduism and Native American faiths, center the land in their beliefs. Judaism is similar. It is in many ways an expression of their connection to the land, with its centering of Jerusalem and the temple and the importance of the land of Israel. Jews maintained this connection even in the diaspora by making yearning for Zion a key part of religious belief and practice. This helped set the stage for Zionism as a political movement in the 19th century. Now, I will briefly go over how to access the curriculum and provide an overview of the lessons which this presentation was based on. The material covered in this webinar comprises the first two lessons of our curriculum, the historical roots of Israel in ancient history and medieval Jewish life in the land of Israel. Each lesson comprises two parts, a PowerPoint presentation and a lesson book. The lesson book contains a lesson summary and primary source-based activities. These lessons are designed as supplements to world history classes, but are adaptable to different types of classes and timeframes. To access the curriculum, navigate to the landing page at www.camera-edu.org/Israel-curriculum. It will look like this. You can then register by clicking the button at the bottom of the screen that says register. If you already have an account, simply click the login button. Once you register, you will be redirected to the home page of the curriculum, which has links to access the 6 high school level lessons, as well as an additional lesson that is geared towards elementary school students. As you can see on your screen, there are 2 buttons. One links to the PowerPoint and the other to the lesson book, which is in PDF form. Each slide in the PowerPoint contains speaker's notes, which provide context and background for the lesson. For example, on your screen, you can see a sample slide featuring the Cyrus cylinder, with excerpts from the cylinder and the Book of Chronicles from the Bible. The notes which introduce Persia and its connection to Jewish history are shown below. Here's another slide from the first lesson, this one featuring a timeline of the Second Temple period. The lesson book contains a lesson plan, as well as the activities associated with it. On the screen, you can see the lesson plan for the first lesson, which features an overview, essential questions, objectives, takeaways, and the sequence of the lesson between the PowerPoint and the activities. There are 2 activities in this lesson. The first is a gallery walk activity that features some of the most significant archaeological discoveries in the land of Israel. One of the artifacts featured in the gallery walk, as well as the chart for the activity, are now on the screen. The second activity is a layered timeline that has students align important events in ancient Jewish history with events from the wider world. The curriculum is meant to be adaptable to a variety of classroom situations. Each lesson is filled with background and context and is quite detailed. This is to give teachers the ability to approach the lessons in ways that suit their needs. By using every part of the lesson, you could teach a full series on Jewish history or pull out portions to fit your time frame. Each lesson was designed with state standards in mind. For example, lesson 1 fulfills the requirement to teach Judaism. If Judaism is not required in your standards, each lesson is great for skill development, such as understanding timelines, reading maps, and analyzing primary sources. For help in pitching this material in your district or school, please reach out to us using the contact information on the screen. Thank you for joining us. We will now answer any questions that you may have.
All right, terrific. Just fascinating. Um, and so well documented. I just want to give a few minutes for other people to populate some questions, and I'll take the liberty of asking the first one while people do that. Can you just explain briefly how you collected the information for these lessons and how you determined reliability?
That's a very good question. So we did so by relying on reputable historians and historical sources. Um, it should be noted that in the lesson there is extensive bibliographies for each lesson in the curriculum, so everything in everything that's there is sourced, so that you're not just relying on me
Mhm.
or any of my colleagues.
Thank you. Um, all right, do you have any insight on why Jewish identity is so misunderstood?
Yeah, I think the reason is that Jews have been able to adapt in the diaspora to the societies in which they lived in, and so this can often obscure their connection back to their religion or to Israel. I mean, it's obviously in some ways the more religious the more religiously observant a Jewish person is, maybe the more obvious that would be, but that's not even that is not necessarily the case. um, Jewish religion adapted in different Judaism adapted in different ways to the different locations where it were, and so it takes a little bit, maybe not that much digging, but some digging beneath the surface to see the connection back. But
Mhm.
ultimately, it doesn't take that much to see it if you look a little bit closely.
Mhm. Thanks, Harry. I'm getting a few questions about the same theme here, and that has to do with Palestine. Um, Jews had been on this land for thousands of years. So when did the Arabs arrive?
Yeah.
And why are they called Palestinians and the Jews are not?
Okay, so this is a very good question. And I should say this is gone into in great detail in the second lesson. Um, but in the 600s, the 7th century, the Umayyad Caliphate conquers the land of Israel from the Byzantine Empire. So the Eastern Roman Empire was ruling the land of Israel um, until the 600s, and then as the Islamic Caliphate, the empire is expanding, it pushes back the Byzantine Empire, which is Christian by this point, um, until and eventually conquers the land of Israel. And so that's when Muslims begin to move in. That's when you start to see Islam moving into the land of Israel. Now when Palestine as a term becomes associated with the Arab population with Muslims is more complicated, because it's not that simple. That it isn't at various points. when the land of Israel is ruled by Islamic is under the rule of Islamic empires, it's called different things. Sometimes it is called um, Palestine or Palestine or Palestine, as it would be pronounced in Arabic. But for example, under the Ottoman Empire, it's not called Palestine. It's actually not even one unit. It's divided between different administrative divisions, but Jerusalem and Beirut. So under the Ottoman Empire, it's not called Palestine at all. But under other Islamic dynasties, it is called Palestine. Um, so that's worthwhile to understand. The term in and of itself is a little bit complicated where it comes from. Josephus says that it comes from the Philistines. Obviously, the Romans, after they put down the Jewish revolt, rename Israel to Palestine, but but they but they of course but the term goes back to the Greeks. Herodotus uses the term Palestine. It may be a Greek translation of the term Israel of Israel, which, if you know your Bible a little bit, you know that Israel is a term that means to wrestle with God. It comes from the book of Genesis, and so Palestine, which may come from the Greek word palaistes, which means to wrestle or a wrestler. So it may actually just be a Greek translation of the term Israel that the ancient Greeks were using. Maybe it's original, or it could be from the Philistines, from the Romans.
You know, another question along the same lines to take it a step further. Someone says, I am trying to get my union to offer this training to our teachers. Last year, unfortunately, they offered another curriculum, which presents Jews as European colonizers who, quote, stole Palestine at the point of a gun, unquote. How do I respond to criticisms that this curriculum erases the Palestinian people?
So our curriculum does not erase the Palestinian people. Obviously, this is the ancient history portion that we discussed, which is older than the modern, what we call the modern Israel-Palestine conflict. But if when we eventually, God willing, get to the later the further portion of this curriculum, you'll see that our curriculum does not erase the Palestinian point of view. We include Palestinian voices in our curriculum discussing the Nakba. We talk about the Nakba. We discuss that perspective in our curriculum. But what our curriculum does not do is does not apologize for the state of Israel or for the Jewish historical connection to the land and our indigeneity to that land.
Mhm. Okay, this has to do with the mechanics of the curriculum. Um, Someone asks about the PowerPoint. Is it incorporated into the lesson? Is showing of the PowerPoint is incorporated into the lesson?
Um, what I can say is that the lesson plans and the PowerPoint are designed to be incorporated. If you go through the PowerPoint, you'll see that there are slides on the PowerPoint that queue up the activities. Um, and so are related to it. So they're not two separate things. They work together. Obviously, there are definitely ways to it's an ex, it we purposefully made it an extensive curriculum to include all of the context and all of the background information that you could ever want. And so obviously I understand I was a teacher before I worked at camera, so I understand that there's limited time frame. So it's also able to be adapted, and you can and it's without much difficulty to edit and to pull out the portions that you would want to do or the activities that you would want to specifically focus on.
Mhm. Okay. All right, maybe a couple more. There are a few more, but if we can get to maybe two or three more,
Mhm.
how does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, very good. Um, they're keeping up pretty well. Someone asked, before Islam arose, what were the relations like between the Jews and the Arabs? Can you address that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard. It's honestly, it's hard to say because frankly, the pre-Islamic Arabia is a very difficult time period and place to research. There just aren't a lot of records for it. Um, we know that there were Jewish tribes that lived in the Arabian Peninsula. We know that from the Quran. We know from early Islamic history. We know that Muhammad clashed with them. We know that he destroyed several of these Jewish tribes or chased them out. Um, and it seems that these Jewish tribes got along fairly well with their neighbors. We also know that in Yemen, actually, in particular, interestingly enough, there was actually a king of Yemen who converted to Judaism during the pre-Islamic days, in the what was called the Himyarite, the kingdom of Himyar. There was a king over there that converted to Judaism. The Jewish community in Yemen, obviously one of the most ancient and significant Jewish communities in world history, Jewish history.
Mhm. One other interesting question, I think, about Palestine, the term Palestine, asks, what sources show that Islamic regimes, other than the Ottomans, referred to the land of Israel as Palestine? Based on my knowledge, the term Palestine was used almost exclusively by the European Christians.
Yeah, so this is definitely the case. It's true. However, a lot of times what would happen is that um, Islamic the early when the caliphate when the Umayyads came in and conquered they kind of preserved some of the Byzantine names for places. So in the Eastern Roman Empire was calling it Palestine. So they kept it to some extent as Palestine. But you're right that that was not really the and it was and the truth is that it was really a backwater of those empire of the caliphates really really for the entire time. And yeah, and under the Ottoman Empire it was definitely never called the Ottomans never called it Palestine. You're right that it was primarily Europeans who used that term. But what it is true, but however, there was some preservation of the Byzantine terminology for the different provinces that they conquered from them.
Thanks, Ari. Okay, I think we'll take one last question. Um, um, the questioner asked, were there some Arab tribes living in Israel before the Arabs conquered it? Wonder if they mean that before the Jews conquered the land?
Well, I mean, meaning before the Islamic conquest in the 600s.
That could be, yes.
Yeah. That's a good question. I'm actually not sure. Um, we do know that the Jews so the Byzantine Empire was quite anti-Semitic, quite systemically anti-Semitic. The Justinian Code, which is, for good reason, very significant and celebrated for many reasons. Also, unfortunately, contains some anti-Semitic laws in it as well. So the Byzantine Empire wasn't great, and so the Jews were actually quite happy to have the Muslims come in. They were also quite happy when at other various points when the Sasanian Persian Empire had various points conquered the land. It traded back and forth between the Byzantines and the Sasanians throughout the 500s and 600s. So the Jews at first were very keen to get away from Christian rule, whether it was under the Zoroastrian Persians or the Islamic Umayyads. Um, so so they did at first. Obviously, later on, there's the Dhimmi regulations that kind of make Jewish life in those Islamic countries not as great as it obviously should have been, depending on the time period.
Well, Ari, you've covered a tremendous amount of many centuries in a half hour. So it's really remarkable. And we thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. And we hope you all will take advantage of this curriculum that the Camera Education Institute has offered. We will follow up in the days ahead with an email with a link to the curriculum, the dates of the next webinars, um, October 22nd. Please save that time at 7:30. And we thank you very much for joining us at this inaugural webinar of our series. Everyone have a wonderful evening.